Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar where we're discussing understanding unit equivalence and credit transfers. Thank you so much for everybody for joining. So thank you so much to everybody for joining me. For those of you that don't know me or that haven't been to the webinars before, my name is Alex Schroder. Guys, I'm pretty active within the vet sector. I do a lot of work insofar as tribunal work, rectification work, etc., etc. I also serve on the ASPA Stakeholder Liaison Group. I'm an ITECA, on the ITECA Queensland State Committee. Like I said, I'm pretty active in the vet sector, and I've been working in the vet sector now for far too long. I'm not going to tell you guys more about myself. If you want to know more about me, feel free to go onto my LinkedIn, and yeah, you should get some juicy information from there if you're thus inclined. Guys, quick one, a bit of housekeeping. First of all, you would have seen on the first page that there's some free compliance tools up for grabs. So I'll tell you guys all about that at the end of this webinar. If we got an absolutely full house today, we're sitting with, I think there's 2 seats spare. With that, I'm probably not going to get time to answer all of your questions. Any questions that I don't get around to answering, please email them to info@complianceinstitute.edu.au. And guys, you may think of questions during the webinar that you'd much rather email. You may have asked a question, I didn't have time to answer it. You may even get to after the webinar and you may go, you know what, I wish I'd asked that. Any questions that you have, once again, email info@complianceinstitute.edu.au. The guys will forward your emails on to me. And sometimes I find it's easier to simply pick up the phone and just chat with you than trying to email you back. Sometimes it's easier emailing you, especially if it's 10 o'clock at night or something. So either way, I always do try and get through to everybody that's asked questions. So please don't be shy. Just email your questions in. You would have seen on the opening page details about the 2023 VET Compliance Conference. If you haven't registered yet, please go and book your spot. The conference runs from the 10th through to the 14th of July. Guys, we've got master classes on assessment tool development and validations. We've also got the ultimate audit preparation masterclass. Both the master classes run over 2 days. And then the main conference day is here in Brisbane as well. Now, if you can't get to Brisbane for the conference, we are live streaming the conference throughout the country. So if you can't get to Brisbane, you still don't have to, or you can watch it from your home city. You don't have to miss out. And with the master classes are all in person. We are running the master classes during the conference week in Brisbane. The master classes will then also go to Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth. And so there's 4. So it's Brisbane during the conference week, and then they're also going to Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. We may be doing Adelaide. It all depends on how much interest there is in Adelaide. But like I said, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Brisbane are absolute givens. Please don't forget, guys, that we have free trainer and assessor webinars at the end of every month. And what these webinars are intended to do is help the trainers and assessors maintain their VETPD, because as we all know, clause 1.13, I think it's C, that says that trainers and assessors must undertake VETPD as part of complying with clause 1.13. Once again, for those of you guys that are new, I do run free trainer and assessor webinars the last Friday of every month. So if you are a trainer and assessor, please go and have a look what's coming up. Get yourself, secure your spot in the trainer and assessor webinar. And if you are a compliance practitioner, if your trainers and assessors do not come in for the webinars, then give them a bit of a nudge, because yeah, like I said, it's completely free of charge. It's there to help them. Um, at the moment, we are finding really, really interesting stuff as well as having a real hard look at providers that are offering Cert 4 in aged care, I think it's aged care, and Cert 3 in individual support. So if you are an RTO or if your RTO does offer individual support or aged care, you may very well get a email from our regulator. If you haven't already, you may very well get an email from the regulator saying, hey, please provide us with XYZ documentation. If you haven't received the email yet, I strongly suggest that you start looking at your operations and your documentations for those two qualifications so that if and probably when you do get the email, at least you are prepared. Guys, quick one for you. With your certificate of attendance, after the webinar, it usually I think happens the same day, you will get an email that with a heading, thank you for attending, and the name of the webinar in the heading. In this email, you'll see that there is the button here to go and download your certificate. Please, please, please keep an eye out for the email. Our certificates of attendance are automatically generated. AICP is not able to go and generate a certificate of attendance for you if you don't receive yours. Now, there's a few reasons why you may not see the email. Okay, the email address that you used when you did the last step of the registration, i.e. the go to webinar stage, if your certificate is sent to exactly the email address that you typed in. So if you made an error in your email address, your email with your certificate won't arrive. Sometimes we find that emails go through to spam folders. It may be a case of maybe the email is blocked on your company's server. But as I said, keep an eye out for the email. If you don't receive it, check in your spam mail. But if for any reason you actually don't find that email, like I said, AICP cannot issue emails manually. And if you guys think about it, we are 498 people today. The number of man hours it would take if for AICP, if AICP gets a request to say I didn't receive my certificate, the number of man hours it will take to verify that you attended, etc., that you're here for the whole webinar, and then that the certificate wasn't issued, etc. It's just something at AICP. It's heavily man hour impacted, and AICP can't help. So please keep an eye out for that email. And like I said, if you don't get the email, perhaps go and look what's happened on the back end on your systems, because AICP isn't able to issue you the certificate manually. Okay, let's jump straight in. After all of that housekeeping, that huge monologue from me, let's get down to the fun stuff. Let's jump straight into the webinar. So today we are looking at credit transfers, when to do a credit transfer, the process to go through. We're also looking at unit of equivalent at unit equivalence, and we'll be having a look to see how far back you can go for unit equivalence. And then we're also going to be chatting about your record keeping, where credit transfers and unit equivalence is concerned. And guys, at the masterclass, at the conference masterclass, we are also covering credit transfers, unit equivalency, and a lot of other stuff in depth. So obviously today is a short webinar. We've only got an hour. Like I said, we'll be covering a lot more of this at the audit preparation masterclass. Clause 3.5 of the standards is very, very, very clear. It says that an RTO must provide credit transfer to students for units that they have already completed with another provider. Guys, so what that means is that your RTO doesn't have the option of not providing a credit transfer, and we are not supposed to wait for a student to come to us and say, hey, can I do a credit transfer? What your RTO is supposed to do is it is supposed to ask the students whether there is any units that they want to credit transfer. And the easiest way to do that is on your enrollment form. Let the prospective student go and tick, yes, I want to credit transfer, no, I don't. And those that don't know what a credit transfer is, because remember, people within the vet sector, we understand what credit transfers are. People outside of the vet sector don't always understand it. And as I said, if you just add that question on your enrollment form, then your students can go yes or no, or if they don't understand what a credit transfer is, then they'll contact your RTO and they'll go, hey, what's a credit transfer? But bottom line to take away from clause 3.5 is your RTO must offer credit transfers to students. And like I said, don't wait for them to come and ask you for it. You need to actually ask the student whether or not they want to credit transfer anything. Unit equivalence is something a bit different, but we offer that. Look, unit equivalence really goes hand in hand with credit transfers, and we'll be going through that a little bit later on in the webinar. So once again, make sure that you offer them the opportunity of credit transfer. And remember one thing, guys, credit transfers and unit equivalency is different than RPL. So please don't get confused with offering them RPL. I mean, we have to do that in any case, but please make sure that you offer them both RPL as well as credit transfer opportunities. So if we have a look at, I'm going to look at unit equivalence here. If we look at unit equivalence, what do we mean by unit equivalence? What we mean is where a unit has been superseded and is equivalent, then you treat it the same way as a straight credit transfer. So let's say, for argument's sake, I want to enroll with ARCP in Diploma of Quality Auditing. One of the units in the Diploma of Quality Auditing is BSB AUD 511. Now, given that the BSB training package recently underwent a complete overhaul, there are so many changes made to the units, and I probably would not hold BSB AUD 511, or let me take a step back. Let's say I did my diploma, or let's say I did BSB AUD 511 in a different qualification 2 years ago. It means that I won't hold BSB AUD 511, but I would then come to ARCP and I would say to them, hey, I'm doing the Diploma of Quality Auditing. One of the units is BSB AUD 511. I hold BSB AUD 501 and I'd like a credit transfer. What ARCP will then do is they will then go onto TGA and they will go and look to see what unit BSB AUD 511 superseded. So in this case, BSB AUD 501 was the previous version of that unit of competency. And because BSB 511 is superseded and equivalent, or is the superseded and equivalent version of AUD 501, credit transfer is a no-brainer. However, what do we do when it's a bit of an older unit that I hold? Let's say, for argument's sake, that I come to ARCP and I say to them, hey, I did 6 years ago, I did this auditing unit in a vet qualification, and my version, but I actually completed BSB AUD 501B. Can ARCP still do a credit transfer for me because it's an old version? And I think, BSB AUD 501B, that was superseded in October 2020. So given that we are now in 2023, can ARCP actually still give me a credit transfer for it? Guys, the answer is a very short and a very absolute yes. Because remember, in the vet sector is all about competency. And if I had previously completed BSB AUD 501B, I was obviously competent, or I was marked as competent in that unit. Because BSB 501B was superseded and equivalent, or was a superseded equivalence of BSB AUD 501, which was then superseded and equivalent on BSB AUD 511, yes, I can get a credit transfer. Because remember, units that are superseded are always only deemed to be superseded and equivalent if the learning outcomes are the same. So in this instance, when I did BSB AUD 501B, I was competent, and I demonstrated my competence with all of the learning outcomes in that unit of competency. So therefore, when BSB AUD 501B was superseded by BSB AUD 501, because 501B was superseded and the equivalent of BSB AUD 501, what that means is the competence that I demonstrated when I was awarded BSB AUD 501B is still valid for BSB AUD 501. And exactly the same with BSB AUD 511. So guys, what I am getting at is that we can go and we can map back the unit equivalencies of the unit that I want a credit transfer for. We can go back as far as we need to until we get to the original unit that might have been superseded and not equivalent, or unless the unit has been deleted. So if we have a look, way many years ago, we had BSB AUD 501A. Now, BSB AUD 501A was superseded with BSB AUD 501B. However, if I held BSB AUD 501A, can I still get a credit transfer? Because at the end of the day, BSB AUD 501A has now been deleted from the BSB training package completely. So then the question would be, okay, but I've done BSB AUD, keep on wanting to miss out the AUD, I'm so sorry. Then the question becomes, I completed BSB AUD 501A, I was competent in BSB 501A, why can't that then be carried forward with the unit equivalency mapping to BSB 501B? Short answer is because BSB 501A no longer exists. It's like I said, it's been deleted from the BSB training package, and it's like, poof, it's gone. So once again, if we are doing unit equivalence, start off with a unit that the student wants to get credit transfer for, and go back every single version or every single previous version of that unit of competency until you get to the stage where it was superseded and was not deemed to be equivalent. And as soon as you get that, stop. So when you do your mapping back, as I said, you need to go to the last unit of competency or the last version of that unit that was deemed equivalent to the unit that superseded it. And if you get to the stage where a unit of competency has been deleted, stop. You actually can't consider the deleted unit of competency. And once again, the reason why we can go back as far as BSB AUD 501B, for argument's sake, is because, as I said earlier on, in the vet sector, it's all about competency. It's all about, does the person that wants to go for the credit transfer, can they actually demonstrate that they hold the competency? And in the example of BSB AUD 501B to BSB AUD 511, the answer is an absolute yes, because the units of competency, or the unit of competency as it was superseded, because it was constantly equivalent, it means that the learning outcomes have remained the same. And because I demonstrated my competency when I did BSB AUD 501B, and because the learning outcomes are still the same, it is deemed that I still have the competencies to meet what is now BSB AUD 511. I hope that makes sense, guys. I'm just going to go back to the slides again, just to reiterate. So if BSB AUD 511 is the current unit, it superseded BSB AUD 501, and it was an equivalence. It was deemed equivalent to BSB AUD 511. And if I hold BSB AUD 501B, because that was superseded and superseded by BSB AUD 501, and it was deemed equivalent, it means the credit transfer, the unit equivalency can just be rolled over. If there's anybody who isn't 100% clear on it, please do ask me in the Q&A session afterwards. But please also remember that we can literally go back to the unit. We can go back as far in the unit history to when we get to the stage where the unit was superseded but was not equivalent, or if we find the unit deleted. Now, I know a little while ago, ASCA put something on their webpage about, look, it's preferable if we don't go back further than X period of time. And I think, if memory serves, don't test me on this one, I think they said, look, it's preferable if we don't go back more than one version. However, that is a preference. The standards doesn't say we can only go back one version. The NVR Act doesn't limit us to going back only one version. And until such time that ASPA actually puts out a direction that we can't go back more than one version or more than back two versions, until the time that that happens, if it happens, then we can go back as far as we need to. Does that make sense? When it comes to unit equivalence, the unit code and title must be the same, or it must be a direct supersession. So as we just looked at with the BSB AUD 501B to BSB AUD 511 unit, because the unit title is the same, the code changed obviously, but because it was equivalent all the way through, we are not too fussed about the unit code or the title remaining the same, because let's face it, every time that a unit is superseded, the unit code changes in any case. It might change by one number. In the olden days, when we still used to use A, B, C's, etc., it might get an extra number behind, it might get an extra letter behind the numbers. But as long as there's a direct supersession, then we can deem that unit to be equivalent. So often I get asked, actually this is an interesting one. As you guys know, VETPrep does ARCP's compliance for them, and the other day they had a student come in and say, hey, I have completed this unit. The title was very, very similar to one of the units that ARCP offers in their Diploma of RTO Compliance Management, but the code wasn't even close. And we went back and we said, look, you can't do it, because just because the title is similar, obviously the learning outcomes aren't necessarily similar. And it was just a hard no. And it was actually quite a pity, because this person then sort of tried to debate this and argue this for over a number of emails. And we just went back and we said, look, it's a hard no, because this is how credit transfers work. And this is how unit equivalence works with superseded training products. So guys, if you do have a student that comes in and they want a credit transfer for a unit where the title might be similar to what they want your credit transfer into, please know that you cannot. You need to go look at the actual code, the unit code of that training product that you are offering, and you need to go and see if what they want to credit transfer for that, if that was actually in the line of supersessions. Does that make sense? Now, when it comes down to record keeping for credit transfers, guys, And I'm going to chat about record keeping for credit transfers as well as unit equivalence. Remember that, as we said earlier on, clause 3.5 says that you must offer, or you must accept a credit transfer request if a person has been deemed to be competent in that unit by another provider. Now, if we think about it, first of all, can that provider be a university? Unless the university has a RTO attached to it that offers their vet products, then no. If a person comes and they say, hey, I want to credit transfer a unit from the diploma of, or unit in the diploma of leadership and management, and look, I did these management units in my bachelor of management, for argument's sake, you can't do a credit transfer, because remember, a credit transfer is literally looking at the competencies that the person had previously demonstrated in that vet training product, and then saying, because you were found to be competent in the past, we no longer require you to do the learning or the assessment again. However, and I'm going to repeat this because it's so important, you cannot credit transfer from a university degree into the vet sector, because it's two completely different streams. You can't, if somebody says, it's like when I was at uni, I'm a bit of a study nerd, so I've done this a few times, but when I was at uni, one of the subjects that I did in my Bachelor of Economics had to do with, I think it had to do with ethics in the workplace or something like that. If I then go and enroll with an RTO to do a course that contains a unit of competency on ethics, I can't say I learned this at university and therefore I want a credit transfer, because once again, one is higher ed studies, one is vet training, and the two just don't meld, at least not for credit transfer purposes. One of the things that you also need to be really, really, really careful of is when somebody comes and they apply for a credit transfer, you've got to go and check the authenticity of the vet record of results and of their testimony that they are presenting. Because remember, I think it's clause 3.2 or 3.4 that says an RTO may not issue an AQF document to somebody unless that person has demonstrated their competence in the entire training product. So let's explore this a bit. Joe Stroke comes to you and Joe goes, I want a credit transfer for this unit, and here are my AQF documents. Remember that based on his AQF documentation that he is relying on and your RTO is using for credit transfer purposes, you are then going to record on his testimony that this unit was credit transferred. And based on that, you are going to issue him with a AQF certificate for the skill set or for the qualification that says that, yep, your RTO credit transferred him, therefore your RTO was satisfied that that person was actually competent. But how do we actually ensure that we are doing this correctly? How do we ensure that we are not issuing AQF documentation to people that haven't demonstrated their competency by way of credit transfer? Guys, the answer to this is not rocket science. We need to go and verify the authenticity of that AQF document with the issuing RTO. So what that means is that Joe Soap comes or I go to ARCP and I go, hey guys, I want to do the Diploma of RTO Compliance Management. One of the units is BSB AUD 511. I've done BSB AUD 501, and I did that with ABC Learning. Here's my testimonial. Hey, I've had a JP sign it and everything. Take my word for it, it's legit. From the RTO side, we smile, we go, thank you very much. We get the student to sign a release that authorizes the issuing RTO to communicate with us about the authenticity of that qualification or that testimonial, and we then go to the issuing RTO and we say to the issuing RTO, is this legit? Obviously not in those many words. It's usually a case of, hey, Alex has come, or ARCP will say to ABC Learning, Alex Schroder has presented this AQF documentation. Can you please verify that your RTO actually issued it? Guys, you want to do this in writing. You don't simply want to pick up the phone and ask the question, because if you get it from them verbally, what record keeping do you have in a year's time or in 6 months' time or when you've left that it actually occurred? Or let's say, for argument's sake, the person that ARCP spoke to at ABC Learning, let's say that they speak to Sally Ann, and Sally Ann goes, yep, it's authentic, but in the meantime, Sally Ann's my mate. Sally Ann then leaves 3 months later, or ASQA comes in 3 months later to go and do an audit on ARCP, and they go, okay, you know, you've made a note here that you verified Alex's BSB AUD 501 unit of competency with ABC Learning. Show us how you verify that. Oh, you know, we had a conversation with Sally. Well, that's he said, you know, that's he says, she says, isn't it? So it's always a case of, if you're going to verify any documentation, and remember right now we are focusing on the AQF documents, when you verify that, verify it straight with the issuing RTO. Do not accept the document on face value from the student, even if they have given you a document that has been witnessed by a JP, by a Justice of the Peace. Don't accept it. Always, or don't accept that as it being valid and authentic. Always go back to the provider and always go and double check that, yes, it is actually, that their RTO did actually issue the testimonial. Now, we know that sort of leading up to 2019 and then again during COVID, we know that a lot of RTOs closed down. So what do you do if somebody comes to you and the AQF documentation, the certification that they want to rely on, has been issued by an RTO that's closed? 9 times out of 10, if you email ASQA, they will actually be able to come back and they'll actually be able to verify that. Because what happens when an RTO is shut down, they need to, or when an RTO shuts down, whether it is ASQA instigated or whether they surrendered their registration, one of the activities that needs to happen as part of the shutdown is the RTO needs to provide ASQA with a full list of all the AQF documents that they issued. And that list includes usually the date which it was issued, the certificate number, who it was issued to, etc. We have found that, like I said, 9 times out of 10, ASQA is able to help you. It's as simple as emailing them, and they're actually pretty quick, or in my experience, they've been pretty quick to get back. So even if the RTO has shut down, still go through your authentication process. And let's say, for argument's sake, the RTO has been shut down, you do email ASQA, and ASQA come back, they say, we can't help you. Keep that email on file, because that way your RTO can demonstrate that it did its best to be able to verify the authenticity. The last stop was ASQA, and they weren't able to help. So keep all of that documentation on file, because if ever any questions are raised, your RTO can show that it did everything within reason to authenticate the AQF documentation, and in the end, you were not able to go through the correct channels and you had to accept something that was witnessed by a Justice of the Peace. Does that make sense? Now, obviously, anything that was issued after 2015 is far easier, because we can jump onto the USI portal. But even when it comes to checking something on the USI portal, I always suggest to RTOs, once you have viewed their USI transcript, print it out and keep it on file, or print it to a PDF and upload it to the LMS, because at the end of the day, we need to be able to demonstrate that we actually went through the verification process. And I know that the UZ portal, UZ, we should be able to get the authenticity at any stage. But let's say, for argument's sake, that we'll speak about Joe Soap again, popular guy this morning. Let's say that Joe Soap gives your RTO permission to use to go into his UZ and verify BSB 8501 from his UZ transcript. You go and verify that. And then after the verification process is finished, Joe Soap then just goes and unauthorizes your RTO to view his UZ transcript, which isn't something that's unreasonable. However, if you come down to audit time 6 months down the line, and ASPR says, you've issued these credit transfers, show us how you authenticated, and you go, I went on to UZ. All right, let's go to his UZ, let's have a look. We can't get in because they deauthorized our view of the UZ transcript. Does that make sense? So where I'm coming from is, at all times, even if you've gone to the UZ register, when you are viewing the copy of the UZ register, go and do a printout, attach it to their student file. If we have worked through unit equivalence, if we have manually mapped we'll use the BSB AUD unit again. I've gone to ARCP, I've said to them, hey, in your diploma of RTO compliance management, you have BSB AUD 511. It is the equivalent of BSB AUD 501B, which I did 10 years ago. Your compliance, part of your compliance function is then going to be, as we discussed, tracking back unit for unit for unit, or sorry, version for version, version by version by version, up until you get to my BSB AUD 501B. But what you need to do is you actually need to also show the mapping. So when we work with our RTO clients, what we would normally do is we would have one document that says, this is the mapping. So we went, we're looking at BSB AUD 511. We then went down to BSB AUD 501, which was superseded and equivalent on this date. Then we go back and we say, okay, the next one after that is BSB AUD 501B, which was equivalent and superseded on this date. Now, most times, we as compliance practitioners, we will also go and take a snapshot on or off TGA where it shows it. Strictly speaking, it isn't really, really necessary, because if the regulator does come in, if they do ask questions, they've got information, they've got access to that information. However, it's best practice to do that. Because remember, as compliance practitioners, what makes us strong compliance practitioners, what makes us expert at compliance, or one of the things that make us expert at compliance and so good at our job, is the fact that we work systematically. And working, to me, one of the things that's included, or that's a core element of working systematically, is having the same processes over and over and over again, or using the same processes. And if we are going to be mapping, if we've got to go back in any case and do a mapping of BSB AUD 511 straight back to BSB AUD 501B, if we're going to go to that effort in any case, we may as well just map it and document it properly. Last thing I want to ask you guys is, does your RTO have a strong and documented compliance system for credit transfers and for unit equivalency? I don't know. I know I've mentioned this in the last few webinars, but for those of you that haven't been here, we noticed, it must have been early last year, that ASPR is actually asking RTOs to show them what their compliance systems are. Now, in the good old days, maybe not so good, we used to think about, if I said to somebody, hey, what is your compliance system for career transfers? They'd go, oh, we have the policies, the procedures, we have the forms, etc. What ASCA is expecting RTOs to have these days is documented compliance systems for this, and obviously use them as well. To give you guys an idea, when I speak about a compliance system, to give you guys an idea, we developed a trainer and assessor credential compliance system we have done this for a number of RTOs. That compliance system for trainer and assessor credentials and currency, I think that consists of about 7 different documents. A compliance and credit transfer system, you are probably looking at about 4 or 5 different documents that form part of this compliance system only. So if you don't have a compliance system for credit transfers and mapping unit equivalence, have a look at that. And if you guys need a bit more clarity on what a compliance system for this would look like, drop me an email at info@complianceinstitute.edu.au. I'd be happy to chat with you. But guys, it is quintessential that you have your compliance systems for a lot of the operational areas in compliance. But given that we're talking about credit transfers specifically today, please make sure that you have a robust, well-documented compliance system for your credit transfers and your unit equivalents. Now, guys, I'm going to get to questions and answers, and after we've done Q&A, I'm going to tell you guys about the, remember I said earlier on that there are free compliance tools up for grabs? So we'll do a few minutes of Q&A, and then I'll tell you guys more about the compliance system, not compliance system, sorry, the compliance documentation. So like I said, bear with me. After Q&A, I'm going to then tell you guys how to get your hands on compliance documents free. Okay, I just want to open up the questions. There we go. Just bear with me. Somehow this never ever go. Ah, there we go. I've done it correctly this time. First time as well. Just going through. Okay. Shilpi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct. Shilpi, you've asked if the student wants to resit for the unit that he or she has already done earlier, can they redo it? Absolutely. So just because somebody may be eligible for a credit transfer, or just because they've done that unit previously, it doesn't mean they can't do the unit. If I can use this as an example, with the Diploma of RTO Compliance Management, ARCP finds that often they'll get compliance managers with heaps and heaps of experience and other qualifications that will say to ARCP, look, I could get a credit transfer for this, or I could RPL this. However, I actually want to do the learning for the unit. And a lot of that is to do with, I think, the fact that remember all of ARCP's courses, all of the learning material has been specifically written by ARCP for the vet sector. And I think when vet practitioners come and they say, hey, I want to do the Diploma of RTO Compliance Management, because all the material is specifically written for this course, a lot of people say, yeah, I can credit transfer or I can RPL, but I think I want to see what it is that I don't know by actually completing the units. So Shilpi, absolutely. Remember, you are offering them the choice. If they choose if they choose to then still go and study the unit, it's completely up to them. Kylie, you've asked, are units that were completed by RPL treated any different than when looking at credit transfers? No. Because remember that in order for that person to have been granted RPL in a unit, they still would have demonstrated their competence, just obviously through RPL assessment, not through coursework assessment. So even if they have been awarded that unit by RPL, they're still entitled to credit transfer. We treat it absolutely no differently. Okay, Stuart, you've asked, what if the qualification code has changed? I'm so glad that you asked this question, because remember, we're not looking at the qualification. We are looking at the units of competency that were completed as part of the qualification. So even if the qualification code has changed, to give you guys an idea, and I'll go back to the Cert 4 and RTO compliance. When I wrote that course and when it was first accredited back in 2018, it had a I think it was 10610 NAT or 10609 NAT or something like that. When it went for reaccreditation a year ago, the reaccredited qualification has a different code to it. However, the units that are being included, or that ARCP has included in the Cert 4 RTO compliance, as well as the Diploma of RTO compliance management, their curriculum has stayed similar. And therefore, if the qualification code has changed, you don't look at the qualification code, you look at the units of competency that was completed in that qualification code. However, before I go to the next question, please remember that a qualification can be superseded and equivalent. However, the units of competency included in it might not be superseded and equivalent. I was working with an RTO in Sydney recently. One of the things that they specialize in is hospitality. Now, the hospitality training package has also recently changed, and we found that when you look at qualification level, the qualification was superseded and equivalent. However, as soon as we went into the units of competency that formed part of that qualification, there was an absolutely large number of those units that were superseded and not equivalent. So please don't only look at the qualification or the skill set or the accredited course. You need to go into the actual individual units of competency as well. Jennifer, you asked, is this information about deleted competencies for an accredited course? Jennifer, what we discussed earlier on about deleted competencies can be for an accredited course. It can come out of a training package. There's absolutely no discretion there. It all goes to what is published on TGA about that training product. Got a question here from Bella. Can you please again clarify? It's slightly confusing. Cert 4 in commercial cookery recently superseded to Cert 4 in kitchen management. There are some units where the unit code and title are slightly different, but it says they are equivalent in TGA. So can a student get credit transfer for that unit? Absolutely. Remember we said earlier on that we can do a credit transfer if the unit code and the title are the same, or if there was a direct equivalent supersession. So better for that part of your question, absolutely. Where even though the qualification title has changed, in this instance, Cert 4 in commercial cookery to Cert 4 in kitchen management, remember we're going to look at the individual units, and if on TGA, if it says the unit is superseded and equivalent, then you absolutely can credit transfer them. Bella, I hope that helped. Tim, you've asked, can you map the one unit to another if it's not the same for equivalency? Tim, I'm not exactly 100% sure what you are asking there. So please do me a favor. Can you please email the question to ARCP, to Compliance Institute, but just expand a little bit on your question, because I'm not 100% sure what you're asking. I'd hate to give you the wrong answer. Michelle, you've said things get a little tricky with skill sets. For example, TAE skill set 0009 is deemed to be equivalent to 0026. However, 3 of the 3 total units contained within the skill set are not equivalent. So, Michelle, your question is, if looking at unit level, you would not award a credit transfer because the units of competency contained in that credit transfer are not equivalent. So I think, Michelle, and guys, for the rest of you, I think the example that I used just now with the cookery, and from Bella's question regarding the cookery, the name, the change of name and qualification, I think, Michelle, that answers your question perfectly. It supports the statement that you've made, because although your skill set title could be the same, when we look at the individual units of competency, they may not be the same, or they may not be equivalent about the superseded. Okay, I don't quite know how to pronounce this name. Shedu. I'm sorry, I'm mucking that up. But you've asked, what about a direct superseded qualification, BSB 60120, Advanced Diploma of Business, from BSB 60215, Advanced Diploma of Business? Once again, remember, guys, we are not focusing on we're not focusing on the qualification title. We are focusing on the units of competency in the qualification. So always go and look at the individual units of competency, and based on that, you issue your credit transfers. Because, look, realistically, when somebody comes to an RTO and says, hey, I've got the BSB, I've got BSB 60215, already hold that qualification. I want to credit transfer all of the units into the new qualification. We don't really do that much. But even if you had to do that, please go into the units, go and have a look if they are equivalent and superseded, or just the same. And if they are not, remember, you can't credit transfer that. Leo, you have asked, sorry guys, I just want to have a bit of water. Leo, you've said or asked, when a student applies for credit transfer for a unit using an equivalent unit, do you issue credit transfer for the current unit or the superseded and equivalent unit? For example, student holds BSB AD 501 and applies for a credit transfer into BSB AD. Sorry, a student holds BSB AD 501 and wants to credit transfer into BSB AD 511. And Leo, you want to know, do you issue the credit transfer for 511 or 501? Your credit transfer is issued for 511 because remember, they already hold BSB AD 501. They want to hold BSB AD 511 without doing the coursework. So therefore, based on them completing AD 501, you are saying to them, by giving them a credit transfer, you are saying to them, you don't need to do this unit. So the credit transfer is always against the unit that they are credit transferring into. So in this case, BSB AD 511. Sarat, you've asked, what if the RTO is not operating at that time and UZ site is not updated? As I said earlier on, Sarath, if that is the case, go back to ASCON, see if they can authenticate, and if they can't help, then I would accept the student's testimonial signed by a Justice of the Peace, witnessed by a Justice of the Peace, but I would want one with an original signature, not a photocopy signature, I guess only because I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to compliance. But if you have no other avenues whatsoever to authenticate the AQF certificate, then get them to then give you an AQF document that has been witnessed by a Justice of the Peace. Michelle, your question is, would you recommend that where there are multiple credit transfers previously occurred, that you should go back to the original issuing RTO, not the RTO that issued the. Okay. I think, Michelle, I think I get what you're saying. I think what you're saying, Michelle, is that if I did my BSB AUD 501s through ABC Learning, I then went over to Billy Bob Learning, and Billy Bob Learning credit transferred me from BSB AUD 501 into. You can try this again. I think what you asked, Michelle, is I used to hold BSB AUD 501B. I got that through ABC Learning. I then went to Billy Bob Training, and I asked them to credit transfer me from BSB AUD 501B into BSB AUD 501. Based on that, I then go to ARCP and I say to them, hey, I have been, I've got a credit transfer for BSB AUD 501 through Billy Bob Learning. I want you to use that to credit transfer me into BSB AUD 511 for the diploma of RTO compliance management. Where does ARCP go back to go and check authenticity? You only go back to the last provider. So, because remember, the assumption is the provider that did the credit transfer from AUD 501B into AUD 501, the assumption is that they would have checked the authenticity. It is not our job to go and check that the previous provider did the right thing, because the assumption is, especially under the NBR Act, that they did do the right thing, and therefore we only need to go and authenticate the document, the AQF document that was issued by the last one. Kylie, you've asked, just checking, you are saying we can use USI instead of the usual verification process. Absolutely, Kylie. If the person completed, or if the AQF document was issued to them during 2015 or later, it should be sitting on USI. You can simply go on to USI as long as they have given you permission to go and view the USI records. You can simply go on to USI, go and view it, print it out, put it on their file, and that's perfect. So you don't have to, and so you can either go USI or you can go verification method with the other RTO. If it's on the USI transcript, save yourself the extra effort and just print out their USI transcript. Tim has said verification of authenticity is not required under the Act. RTOs must accept AQF issued from another RTO unless they believe it may be fraudulent. ASCA cannot make a finding of non-compliance to an RTO who's not kept records of verification of authenticity. Tim, yes, if you read the standards on face value, and if you read the clause or different clauses from the standards and you don't tie them in with the other clauses, then the NBR Act doesn't say that you need to go and authenticate. However, what the NBR Act says and what the standards say, and once again, I think it's clause 3.5 or 3.2, the standards and the Act says an RTO may not issue an AQF document or AQF certification to somebody who hasn't demonstrated their competence in the entire training product. So then the question comes, if your RTO hasn't actually authenticated the AQF documentation that the person relies on for credit transfer, how can your RTO then know that the person has actually got the competency, and how can your RTO then go and issue the AQF or a new AQF document? Guys, by the way, I love it when people start arguing the NBR Act with me, because I live, sleep, breathe, eat the NBR Act. I can quote the NBR Act to you 3 o'clock in the morning. Graham, you've asked, I have a client who has completed an RII unit and actually need to do a different unit. Can this be credit transferred or deemed equivalent? Graham, if you go into the 2 units of competency, go onto TGA, see if on TGA the RIIWHS is deemed to be the same as MSM PER 205. If it is published on TGA as being the same, then yes. If not, no. Hina, if a student's previous RTO has been shut down by ASPA due to non-compliance related to the unit the student requested credit transfer for, should the current RTO still proceed with the credit transfer or not? Unless, look, it's a difficult one. If you decide, we never know why an RTO is shut down. You know, that information or the full story is never published. If your RTO says, hey, because ABC Learning has been shut down for non-compliances, we will not accept your AQF documentation as, for credit transfer purposes, what you are essentially saying to that student is that they're sitting with a falsified AQF document and therefore you won't credit transfer them. But what you're also then doing is you are essentially deciding that that document is false without any evidence, and I certainly would not do that. I think that is a massive, massive no-no. Guys, quick one for you. I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes. If anybody's got 2 minutes, I'm just going to spend the 2 minutes and just quickly tell you guys, I said to you earlier on, there are some free compliance tools up for grabs. If you book for the compliance conference, whether you book for it virtually, in person, and whether you or not, or if you book for a masterclass, then as part of it, I'm going to give you guys a set of free compliance tools that if you were to buy it, you'd probably pay about $2.5 grand for it. However, like I said, I'm busy designing some compliance tools for the guys that always come to the webinars. And if you do go and read, or if you do go and register for the full compliance conference, or just the conference day, or for any of the master classes, you are going to get a beautiful suite of compliance tools absolutely free of charge. So if that interests you, go off to complianceconference.com.au, have a look at the program, have a look at what dates the different masterclasses are being offered. Go and book your spot, and like I said, you're going to get an absolutely marvelous set of compliance tools that you can use and abuse and change and whatever as you wish. But guys, it's a really good suite. And yeah, as I said at the start of this, it's going to be an amazing conference. So go and check it out on the website. I am getting people jumping up and down and saying to me, I'm over time. So guys, I am going to love and leave you. I have run 5 minutes over time. My apologies. Please don't forget, any questions, just email them off to info@complianceinstitute.edu.au. I will get your questions. And once again, if you want more info on the conference, it's a very, very difficult URL. www.complianceconference.com.au. Thank you so much for spending this last hour with me. Have yourself an amazing weekend, and I'll see you guys for the next webinar in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.